Hello, everybody. Over the next 45 minutes, I am going to cover the main aspects of a holistic control of Salmonella in poultry. So I will cover an introduction, main characteristics of Salmonella and pathogenesis, risk factors, challenges in layers, breeders and broilers, and control strategies. So we have two very clear different types of Salmonella, two serotypes. The first one is host-specific serotypes, where the Salmonella will infect the animal and cause normally a systemic infection, septicemia, and a severe disease. In chickens, this is Salmonella gallinarum pullorum. We have others group of serotypes, which are the zoonotic serotypes, and what they do, they colonize the intestinal lining of the animals, but they cause no very significant clinical signs in poultry, maybe a mild diarrhea or inflammation. But the main problem with these serotypes is that they cause disease in humans. So food poisoning is very relevant in these serotypes of Salmonella. Why zoonotic Salmonellas are important? Well, they are the top zoonosis in the world, and we can see here that they cause just under 20% of the zoonotic diseases, and all of this comes from food, as we can see also there in the table, and the main food products identified as causing this salmonellosis is poultry. An additional consideration that is also very important is that Salmonella is increasing their multi-resistant strains, which creates a lot of difficulties when we want to treat humans that have the infection. Salmonella also is, as a consequence of the infection in the animals, in poultry, will cause losses because of the use of antibiotics where they are allowed. Commercial devaluation of the product that has to go for cooked processing, export limitation, cost of recalling if is confirmed that the products are contaminated with Salmonella. A little bit about the classification that, and the main one that is widely used is Kaufman and White classification for the different Salmonellas, and this classification is based on the O antigen, that is the antigen that Salmonella has in the cell wall, and also in the flagella antigen, which is called H antigen. Some Salmonellas could also express a slightly different flagella antigen, and then it's called F antigen. So you can see here that Salmonella pullorum and gallinarum have not got flagella, so that means they are non-motile Salmonellas. And then we have Enteritidis and Typhimurium that are with motile characteristics. So this is a very summarized table of all these groups of Salmonella with and I have highlighted Typhimurium in group B, Infantas in group C, and then enteritides in group D, which are, I would say, worldwide, probably the most prevalent salmonellas in poultry in the majority of countries. So if we go into some more detail in terms of these zoonotic salmonellas, they are gram-negative bacteria. There are more than 1,500 serotypes. Salmonella is both vertically and horizontally transmitted. And as I mentioned, birds not often show clinical signs unless they are young or immunocompromised. There is a vast variation in the behavior of all these different serotypes, how they survive in the environment, for how long, the characteristics that they can harsh environments that they can survive on. So it's not easy to have a list of rules to control zoonotic salmonellas. We have to go a little bit deeper and understand which salmonella we are dealing with, and even knowing the serotype. Quite often we need to go a little bit further. Some serotypes will stay in the intestinal tract and will only very occasionally become invasive, meaning they will leave the intestinal tract, go to the blood stream and start distributing in the different organs. So the effective control of Salmonella needs this holistic approach to minimize contamination and boost host defenses. Very important consideration is that the cross protection between serotypes is variable. So vaccination should never be, for any disease, I dare to say, the only strategy. The use of antimicrobials for Salmonella could also help short term, I would say, but in many countries, an example would be the European Union, this is not allowed. So it's important to identify the critical control points in the production chain and have a solid and develop a solid monitoring program through the chain beyond the official monitoring. If we want to understand how Salmonella moves within our organization, how it enters the organization, if we want to really control, we may not be able to eliminate it, but control is key. So Salmonella, some information about Salmonella in the EU. The EU was one of the first regions that put in place an action plan, and there are control programs for food safety to deliver Salmonella-free poultry products to consumers, what is called from farm to fork strategy. And is the core of these control programs is the monitoring of the whole chain. The downside is that these monitoring programs, the official ones, quite often are not, they don't give us enough information to tackle Salmonella properly. So we need to go, as I mentioned, beyond those. So the holistic approach will include to avoid the introduction of Salmonella in our operations by using biosecurity, vaccination, reduction of contamination in feeder water, by additives, for example, reducing the multiplication of additives. Reducing the multiplication of Salmonella in the intestine, which again, additives could be a good tool. And the last, but also very important, the awareness, create awareness in the consumer in terms of the hygiene in the kitchen, separation of meat and vegetables during the cooking and preparation process. So if I explain very quickly the pathogenesis of Salmonella in poultry, so Salmonella will be ingested orally, will start attaching to the gut, colonizing the gut, and from that point, it will start multiplying. The main area in the intestine where the colonization and multiplication happens is in the ceca. And that's why the ceca is so important when we want to sample for Salmonella. Is one of the target, a very important target. So another important consideration is that Salmonella in individual birds is shed intermittently. So we can have a percentage of the chickens only shedding the Salmonella, and it will vary from 1 week to the next. And this percentage of birds that actually shed Salmonella could be relatively small, but it will increase, and I will show shortly a little bit more information about this. So what happens after the Salmonella colonized and multiplied in the intestine? It could go systemic, so it passes through the intestinal wall and start invading macrophages, where it survives the immune system and starts distributing to the different parts of the anatomy of the chicken, all the different organs, liver, spleen, ovary. So this is a little bit, I will say, a good pictorial representation of this process. So we have how Salmonella enters a flock. It could be because the contamination in the environment is very high. It could be because the animals are more susceptible because they are young, because they are under stress, because of stress, because of physiological processes like coming to big production is a very stressful process, because the changes of feed, vaccinations, mycotoxins are also cause immunosuppression. And there are other gut pathogens that can also, let's say, harm the intestinal lining and make it a lot easier for Salmonella to start to attach and settle, let's say, settle in the intestinal tract and cause an infection. So Salmonella enters the the body of the birds, start the colonization because there are variable conditions in the gut, multiplies, which cause inflammation, oxidative stress, because of this process of multiplication. And then in some Salmonellas, as I mentioned, we have this invasive phase, meaning it goes to spreading to other organs. So if I now go into risk factors and challenges in poultry production, concentrating on these two aspects. So in terms of risk factors in the whole production chain, well, there are, we have to walk through the whole primary breeders, the hatchery breeder, the breeders, the broiler hatchery, the feed, broiler farms, and processing. Processing, I have highlighted processing because it's the last stage, the last chance to try to reduce salmonella in the chicken products before it goes to the consumer. It's not the only strategy, and it should not be the only strategy. And in fact, for example, in the US, where they traditionally have been concentrating mainly, not only, but mainly in controlling salmonella in the slaughterhouse and during processing, they are now going into putting a lot more effort and focus on controlling salmonella during production in farms. I mean, in farms, to reduce the level of contamination in the broiler farms and therefore going into the slaughterhouse. In this process, as we can imagine, traceability, knowing where the eggs go in from the different farms into transport into the different machines in the hatchery hatchers is very important in case we have a positive and we have to make decisions of what to do with these products that are the eggs that are infected, destroy them, or while we are doing the investigations, hold them. Many strategies that we can put in place to reduce our risk of salmonella spreading wider. So talking about challenges in the different productions and going into layers and breeders, well, we know that salmonella is horizontal and vertical transmission. So we have the risk of contaminating the progeny and also the eggs for human consumption. And I would like also to put a little bit of attention into pseudo-vertical. And meaning that the salmonella may not be internally in the embryo, but it may be on the outside of the egg or even in the surface inside the egg because of this cooling process while the egg is cooling from the hen temperature to the environmental temperature. There is a hoovering effect, so it absorbs all the contamination around. So that's why it's so important that the handling process, anything that has to do with handling eggs at the farm and after, we reduce everything is as clean and sanitized as possible. Another consideration also in layers and breeders is controlling stress. Stress is always really quite important to control. So in this small graph, you have here how susceptible in the vertical plane, how susceptible salmonella is to how susceptible the chickens will be to salmonella infections. At the beginning, they will be very susceptible because there is no microbiota that could compete with the chicks, and also they are quite stress, and then the susceptibility decreases because of vaccinations, because the immune system is more mature. And then when we start transporting the birds, laying, there is a big peak of increase of susceptibility to contamination, then it reduces. And then if we if the birds go through a molt, whether it's induced or a natural molt, this is also quite stressful, and they will be very susceptible to Salmonella. And then with age, the immune system is less capable of fighting diseases, coping with the pathogens, so the susceptibility increases. Also, the duration of the protection from vaccination, for example, there is a decrease, and this is will increase the susceptibility of the birds. So specifically, if we talk about layers, we can highlight that layers normally they are multi-age farms. Again, critical points, anything to do with egg handling, that is a big area, very important in Salmonella control. The cycles in layers are longer and longer, so that is also a challenge in terms of how long this protection lasts, and the immune system, as I mentioned. And then the housing systems in layers are a little bit more complicated, more equipment, more things to clean, so more chances of Salmonella being able to be protected by organic matter and carry to the next placement. And we should never forget also that Salmonella could live very harsh environments, and also for a long time, months. It could live for months. Vectors could also carry Salmonella, so in this context, very important to have rodent control in place, insect control. Pets are also a potential risk for transmission of Salmonella, so everything needs to be controlled. So if we talk about breeders, during the laying period in breeders, the monitoring program normally is every 2 weeks, and the main reason is that the objective will be to produce Salmonella-free chicks, and the risk of contamination of carrying the Salmonella into the hatchery, and from the hatchery to other farms. Egg hygiene, as I mentioned, really quite important. Nest, egg collection system, separation of clean and dirty, including dirty from the nest, eggs. So making sure that we reduce as much as possible floor eggs. And in this context, breeders are, we can use a little bit more investment. We can invest a little bit more in breeders, so vaccination, feed and water additives, feed heat treatment, also to consider. In broilers, well, their immune system is immature. They don't have a stable microbiota that could compete with Salmonella, so they are really quite susceptible. So how we protect the day-old chicks? We need to make sure that the breeders are free of Salmonella, and we need to make sure also that we have a top biosecurity, especially during the first few weeks of life. This is also important for Marix. And then clean water, clean feed, litter, clean shavings, testing, all these inputs, also very important. Optimize structural intestinal development, immune system with the techniques, making sure that the chicks, the brooding is as optimal as possible. And now there are new ways with what is called this early feeding, and without going into a lot of details, where they feed the embryo or the chicks as soon as possible. But this will be for other presentation. Enhance the protective action of the intestinal microbiota, and competitive exclusion. I also mentioned that is very important, meaning microbiota that is going to compete with Salmonella. So if we go to the last part of the presentation, control and prevention strategies. So at the top, we have monitoring throughout the poultry production chain, what we call tracking and tracing. So we not only need to know that it's a group D or a group C, but we want to know what it is to be able to also, and beyond, do maybe some genetic analysis to help us to understand the epidemiology of Salmonella. Antibiotics, vaccination, improve intestinal health with additives in feed and water, biosecurity and hygiene. And I have biosecurity is a big topic, but I have highlighted dust control just to show something a little bit different, and additives in feed and water. So this is a summary, a little bit obviously sort of with a lot of interactions, a lot of factors, a lot of equipment, product, chicks, eggs moving through the chain. So we have to minimize and analyze where the risks are and put controls in place, and to know if anything is happening, and then be able to make decisions as quickly as possible. Traceability, always key. So a few words on antibiotics. So antibiotics, they are in the allowed, but they can help, especially at early stages of the control of Salmonella, to reduce the contamination of the environment, the shedding of from the birds. But it should never be a long-term, even a medium-term strategy, because what I mentioned, that Salmonella, it has been discovered that is a bacteria that is able to carry a lot of genes that make them resistant to many antibiotics that could also be critical for human health. So we should minimize as much as possible the requirement to use them in general, but specifically against Salmonella. And we should monitor when we use them to see if what is happening with the resistance. And after salmon antibiotic treatment, is good to use probiotics to help the animals to start new bacteria colonizing the intestinal tract, so the intestinal they are not open again to be contaminated with Salmonella that is still in the environment. A few words also on vaccination. So vaccination, I would say, it has been key in the success of Salmonella in many regions, and I think is is very important in Salmonella control because it reduces the percentage of positive animals, and it also reduces the shedding, like in other diseases, basically. But it reduces the shedding, but it doesn't eliminate Salmonella, obviously. There is also a partial protection between serotypes. Ideally, what it has been shown, and it looks like the most successful vaccination program is a combination of live and inactivated, and even now there are products that could be used safely in lay. We have available both licensed and autogenous vaccines, and typically vaccines are very much used in breeders, also in layers, but even in broilers that live for a bit longer in some regions, that the vaccines are also an option. But there is no one answer for Salmonella. We have to use several tools, and as I have highlighted there. So vaccines, in the objective of vaccination in breeders and layers is to increase the protection of the progeny, reduce vertical transmission, and so provide the chicks with some antibodies early doors when they are still very susceptible, and again it has been proved that it could help. So we will have the broilers with less contamination with Salmonella going to the chicken farms, and if in countries, for instance, in Saudi Arabia, where broilers are processed very young, is a good chance that in this context vaccination is extremely useful. The most common product programs worldwide, I would say, is, as I mentioned, this combination of lives and inactivated. How many lives? Well, it will depend on the risk. The country usually is between 2 and 3 lives. If we go now to discuss a little bit about improving intestinal health, so we have a list of different alternatives, probiotics that I have already mentioned, prebiotics, bacteriophages, phytotherapeutics that have recently also become quite more widely used, and they excuse me, they have proved to be also a good support, and especially organic acids that act in the gut, protecting the gut are important alternative. So to improve intestinal health in a flock, we need to reduce susceptibility, so improve the function of the gut health, vaccination, reduce stress, reduce the infection dose that the birds are, so making the birds less susceptible to the infection, reduce Salmonella shedding. So meaning that we need to reduce the stress of the chickens and reduce the carrier animals, the contact between the chickens and these animals that could be infected. And reduce the pressure, cleaning and disinfection, fumigation. I cannot highlighted enough how important this is. Competitive exclusion could also support intestinal health. So I'm going to go a little bit in more detail into the metabolism of carbohydrates. So when the birds digest and metabolize the feed, the objective is to reduce it to simpler molecules. So we can see polysaccharides, complex molecules reduced to simpler and simpler, and at the end we will have monosaccharides that with the digestion process will end up producing lactate and acetate, which are components, which are products that what is called the good bacteria, bifidobacteria, Lactobacillus firmicus especially, will be using to produce propionate and especially butyrate that are very important in the support of the intestinal health. But what happens when there is an over supply to the intestinal health of the checking of these complex molecules? The chain slows down, and there is a huge production of lactate and acetate, and unfortunately these compounds are toxic for these good bacteria that I mentioned. So the monosaccharides follow another route in the metabolism and starts producing sulfate and other compounds that cause inflammation. In this process, you can see here that Salmonella is very much involved in this the development of this poor gut health. So, and last but not least, biosecurity and hygiene control. So dust, for me, is a major carrier of Salmonella, because dust could let's say, travel for a long or relatively long distance, and Salmonella could be carried by dust. So, for example, dust is a very, very good sample as part of a monitoring program because of this reason. So we need to make sure that while we clean and disinfect the houses, we also make sure that the environment where the houses are is where possible sanitize. I would say sanitize, and because if the environment is contaminated, eventually the Salmonella will be carried inside the houses. Okay, a little bit about organic acids in water and feed, because as part of this biosecurity and cleaning and disinfection of inputs into the farm. So additives could be very effective in drinking water to kill or minimize the multiplication of bacteria, and in between these antibacterial activity acids, we could have acetic, formic, propionic acid. But very important to consider that these products will only be limited to the crop. Once the acid goes beyond the crop, the digestive system will neutralize it very quickly. Another good strategy in feed to provide the birds with feed free of salmonella or as low as possible amount of salmonella, so the birds are is below what we are trying to do is get salmonella, if not 100% negative, at least below the infection level for the chicks, for the birds. So in order to be able to have these feed additives, this effect, this long-lasting effect, it will depend on the formulation, but they need to be protected, coated or esterified to be able to go beyond to be able to survive, let's say, survive the acid, the enzymes and the environment in the intestine, and arrive to the target areas, which is the last part of the intestine, the ceca, and being able to there neutralize salmonella. And very quickly here, you can see in this table where, well, this was a trial where the birds were infected with 10 to the 5 coliform units of salmonella, and there was a sample 5 days later. The birds were given, so the controls, no acid, another group formic acid, acetic, another group propionic, and the fifth group butyric. So you can see that acetic actually increased the amount of salmonella, butyric reduced the amount of salmonella, but very important consideration is that when we compare the form of butyric, so we have in the group, the control, we have the non-protected butyric, the protected butyric, and half a half. You can see how there is no differences between the group, the control group, and the group that was giving the non-protected butyric, because the butyric was, as I was mentioning, was basically neutralized before it got to the area where it needed to arrive to the latter part of the intestine. So I know this is a sort of a little bit heavy slide, but it is I'm trying to summarize the potential solutions in each part of the process of the salmonella entering the birds, colonizing, multiplying, and invasive, what we can do in each part of this process, and what products we are available and we should consider and see if they are the right ones for us in our situation, in our environment, in our company. So I'll not go any further, otherwise this presentation will last for quite a number of hours. And here I'm just giving an example of a salmonella prevention program, so covering all these different aspects that I mentioned as part of this holistic control of salmonella. So monitoring program, cleaning and disinfection, biosecurity, probiotics at placement, use of protected butyric and medium chain fatty acids, vaccination. So you can see that in this program, everything is considered to have to use all the tools that we have available to control Salmonella. Because it's not easy. It's not easy. I'm not saying it's easy, but it's possible. So as a conclusion, an effective control of Salmonella requires a holistic approach, and it always starts with monitoring to understand what Salmonellas we have, what serotypes, and how do they move in our organization. And there are novel tools on vaccination, on additives, knowledge that we have also in biosecurity to enhance the Salmonella control and give additional support. So I hope the presentation has been useful, and I am open to questions that you may have. Thank you very much.